A Texas appeals court has ruled a children's hospital must continue medical care for a terminally ill 11-month-old girl for now. The baby girl, Tinslee Lewis, reportedly has a congenital heart defect, chronic lung disease, and high blood pressure. She's been on a ventilator since July and requires cardiac support, painkillers, sedation, and medical paralysis. Tinslee has been at Cook Children's Medical Center since her premature birth, and now the hospital wants to remove the 11-month-old's medical care. The family objects. Tinslee's mother even told reporters her daughter is awake most of the time when they are together. A lower court judge ruled medical interventions could be stopped, but in early January, the Second Court of Appeals of Texas granted Tinslee emergency relief, ordering that her treatment continue until an appeal is considered. Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton released a joint statement on the case, saying, in part, the case of Tinslee Lewis is complex and heartbreaking, and the state will continue to support Ms. Lewis's exhaustion of all legal options to ensure that Tinslee is given every chance at life. Joining us now in studio to discuss this case is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks for having me on.
The medical care of this baby is in the hands of the court right now. As Texas's top lawyer, what are your thoughts on this case?
So it's very sad. It is a heartbreaking story. It's a mother trying to save her child, and it's sad that we're in a situation where potentially a hospital is ending the life of a child without the mother's consent.
Can you explain for us what is Texas's 10-day rule and how is that impacting Tinslee's case?
So it's having a dramatic impact. It allows hospitals to basically determine through their ethics committee that they're no longer going to treat, and they give 10 days for the parent to find either another place to treat or for court intervention, and if that doesn't occur, they stop life-sustaining treatment.
Does this law offer any protections for children like Tinslee?
So, I mean, the only rule of protection that it offers, once a hospital decides that they're not going to treat, the only protection it offers is the 10 days. Now, we would argue that this statute is unconstitutional. My job is to defend state statutes, but the ones we don't defend are the ones we believe are unconstitutional because that's a higher calling for us than a state statute.
What are the next steps here? What are the next steps for the Lewis family? You know, what are their legal options?
So fortunately, the Court of Appeals that is being appealed to and that we've sent a letter to has put a stay. So I mean, they've stopped the hospital from pulling life support. So until they make the decision as to whether the hospital has the ability to take this child off of life support, the child will remain on life support.
I know that you released a joint statement with Texas Governor Greg Abbott on this case. Are there any steps that you two can take specifically to protect Tinslee?
So one, we speak out, which we've done. Two is we have joined the legal action by asking the court to allow this child to live and let the parents make that decision as to whether they want to continue treatment.
Thank you for speaking out, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us about this important case.
Well, this is a very important case to me. It's a very important case to our citizens. If you can't protect life, what can you protect?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General.
Thanks.
Bishop Michael Olson of Fort Worth, Texas, has offered to assist the Lewis family. In a statement released earlier this month, Bishop Olson said, healthcare decisions involving the vulnerable and severely ill are best made in the patient's interests by family and healthcare providers and not by judges, politicians, or lobbyists. The diocesan statement continues, Bishop Olson is offering to consult with baby Tinslee's family and appropriate Texas Catholic healthcare facilities. We continue this conversation now with Katey Price, Communications Director for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Katey, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me.
First off, I want to get any reaction or response that you have to what Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton just told us about this case.
Sure thing. We're just really happy that we have such a strong advocate for Tinslee and for her mother, Trinity, in this terrible, terrible time of need for the family.
Absolutely. Katey, can you explain how does the Tinslee Lewis case, this heartbreaking case, compare to other cases we've seen abroad in the UK, like Alfie Evans and Charlie Gard? Are there comparisons there?
Sure. In both cases, and actually in all three cases, we have fetal abnormalities involved. And so we have these difficult decisions that are being made by hospitals, administrators, doctors, and not by the family. And here we have Trinity Lewis, and she's just fighting to give her daughter a chance. And what she's saying is, look, you know, no institution knows better than I do how to care for and how to provide for my daughter.
We hit on it a little bit with Attorney General Ken Paxton, but can you tell us more about Texas's 10-day rule? Is there any additional legislation that could provide more protection for patients like Tinslee?
Sure, and I wish there was more legislation that could help someone like Tinslee. What we have in Texas is we see there's this 10-day rule, this law that says, a doctor, if a doctor believes that a patient's life-sustaining care should be stopped and a hospital committee agrees, then you have 10 days in which that family can find a new hospital, some alternative care to take that patient. Otherwise, the care is going to be stopped. So, Texas is just one of a very small handful of states that has such a law on the books, and it's really tragic and it's hard when you have a bad, unconstitutional law infringing on a patient's right to live.
The Charlotte Lozier Institute works to protect life on a number of fronts, including patients who are medically vulnerable like Tinslee. Can you tell us more about those specific efforts?
Yeah, definitely. So we have 60 associate scholars who are researching cases just like this. And what we essentially see in a case like that of Tinslee Lewis is, look, this is a very slippery slope. And we have both lawyers and researchers as well as medical doctors saying, wow, you look at a case like this, it's a slippery slope. So if it's one day it's someone with a severe fetal abnormality like Tinslee Lewis, another day it's Down syndrome. And so where does it stop? In between, it's a very, very tricky condition. It's a slippery slope.
Finally, Katey, we're talking about this little girl, Tinslee Lewis, and no doubt that she is suffering. She has a heart defect, she has lung disease. But Katey, can you speak to why her life, even though there is that suffering, her life is still worth fighting for?
Sure. I mean, she is just like you and I here. She was fearfully and wonderfully made by a creator who loves her. And so her life is worth living. And then also just I ask your audience, what do we say to ourselves as a society? What does this say about us? It should prick the conscience of every American to think, this is a vulnerable little girl, and this is just a family who wants to love her and who says she has a right to live. Who is the state? Who are we to say that she doesn't have that right?
Beautifully said. Katey Price, Communications Director for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine.
When it comes to respect for human life for the medically vulnerable, here's what the Catholic Catechism states. Discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. Here, one does not will to cause death. One's inability to impede it is merely accepted. The decisions should be made by the patient if he is competent and able, or if not, by those legally entitled to act for the patient, whose reasonable will and legitimate interests must always be respected.